Kia ora whānau, welcome to another episode of the Paul and Henry Show. That's me, Paul, and my good friend Henry, talking about things you should know about being a regulator. Today we've got the pleasure of having Anthony Fewster with us today. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you, Paul. Good to be here.
Anthony Fewster
Correct.
is the Senior Manager for Health and Safety and Wellbeing. So good to have you along. You're going to talk to us, or particularly talk to everyone else.
Yeah, I hope so.
All things I need to know about health and safety.
Yeah, there's been a lot of good messaging through the organisation, and regulatory services have been good with what they've been doing lately, so keen to sort of add something.
Yeah, sure. So what are the sort of key things you think people need to know as regulators about looking after their health and safety? Firstly,
they've got to look after themselves. So, their safety is, their priority. So everyone, look after yourselves first and foremost. There's no expectation from Nicole, Rosie, Kane, or any of the managers that people put themselves in harm's way. So we want to make sure that people, firstly, if they're in a situation they feel uncomfortable, move themselves away and speak to their manager about it. That's the first bit. The other thing, I suppose my key messages for regulators is around making sure people avoid harmful interactions or events or situations where, customers and members of the public are threatening or violent or, such things. That's something we see is really prevalent. We want people to sort of be aware of that and situations that they can, potentially get in, which is a fair few for regulators. And the other probably key message is just to make sure you're reporting using Cordetto My. So, getting the information into the database so that we can actually track that, provide the information back to the end user and back to through managers, so we can actually take some more targeted action.
So that's Cordetto My. It's the Waka Kotahi Health and Safety Internal Reporting System, and we'll chuck a link in the video here.
Yeah, please
Well,
report.
All right. One of the big things we've been pushing throughout many of our episodes is planning, like the importance of planning. How does that feature, or how does the health and safety stuff feature in planning if you're going out to the field, you're going to do a piece of work?
Yeah, look, traditional planning for health and safety should be integrated with the general work planning, so making sure you know where you're going, you know the types of risks that you're facing, both physical hazards, slips and falls, or even just driving and those sorts of things, making sure you're familiar with the car, but then also the areas you're going and the types of people you're going to be dealing with depending on the scenario. So, the context of your work environment is really important when you're considering your work safety. So.
Yeah. And it's inevitable that as regulators we often have to give people news they don't want to hear. You've got any tips or tricks around that?
Well, having a plan, so making sure you know where you're going, making sure you've got actually really clear explanations for what you are trying to explain, and if it is bad news, actually know that that's going to be perceived as bad news. Some people sort of give news, and from a regulator's perspective, it's sort of a day-to-day activity. I think for the end user sometimes, or the person out there in the field, whether they be a mechanic or a member of the public, this is big for them. Yeah. So appreciating that emotional impact that might have and the response, the potential response.
I think that links a lot to one of the episodes we did around communicating with people and the engagement side of things, and how we write our letters, and if we're too pointy-headed and formal and bureaucratic, how much that can inflame situations.
Yeah, and people want to feel that they are having a conversation and that they're being heard. Even if ultimately everything they say doesn't change the outcome, they want to feel that they're being heard.
Yeah, exactly right. So having that sort of sense of empathy and that they are a part of this conversation, even though there's an outcome that they may not like, but making that as palatable as possible, I suppose. Yeah.
So making sure you're planned, making sure you've done that kind of risk assessment. Who's going to be there? How am I going to get there? What do I need? PPE.
Do you need backup? Do you have PPE?
All that sort of
Is your equipment? Yep.
And then using your comms skills in a way that aren't going to inflame situations. Now, we know that we can do all of that really, really well, but there will still be some people out there who might kick off a little bit. I've heard about the HEAT model. You want to talk me through that?
Yeah, so that's the model we've been working through the training program that's just been released. We should pop a link of that up. Keeping myself safe, so the training module is available to everyone on Puna Koi. And the HEAT model that's emphasised through that really uses the core skills of the regulator, so normal communication skills, but HEAT is about hearing the person out, making sure we empathise with them, actually, as we just said, apologise if we need to, so understand that people are sensitive about this, and there is a sense of disappointment that this situation's come to be. But actually, the last part of the HEAT model is to take action. So actually, sort of explain what you're going to do to support that person to make things work for them and for us. So we're making sure there's clear action.
Yeah.
It's probably worth also saying there's a difference between a disappointed and an angry person and someone who's aggressive and who's being really out of line. And it's important for all of our regulators to make sure that you don't accept poor behaviour. We don't expect anyone to tolerate that, and you've got to sort of either get yourself out of the situation, report it to your manager, and let that person know that they've crossed the boundary.
So I guess what you're saying is at some point the heat model is great, but at some point there's actually a time just to cap it.
Exactly right.
And live to fight another day.
Exactly right. And there are some people that have been, on no-go lists and those sorts of things. And so, there's plenty of action that we can take. The other action, obviously, to report it.
Cool.
Yeah, and I guess, we've got a lot of earnest, hard-working people who want to get their job done. And the best way, of course, is to talk with people face-to-face and have those good conversations. But if that's not possible because it's not safe or comfortable, we can still get our job done. And just the lawyer in me's thinking, there's a lot of useful bits of law where if we have to, often we can just leave a letter at a premises and it's deemed to be read and understood.
Yes.
Not all the time, oftentimes. So you don't feel like you have to stay in the conversation to finish the work. There's other ways to finish the work from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah, because we'll never resile from our position as the regulator because someone's being a bully. Like you say, we've got those other tools for dealing with it.
Yeah.
Hey, we've talked about safety quite a bit. I'm interested too in the health aspect of that. And it's got a big role to play. You said at the start, look after yourself. What's the health aspect of health and safety?
Yeah.
From a regulatory perspective.
Yeah, well, our main focus areas across our team and part of our strategy and working with all of the operating groups across transport and regulatory services, mental health is a huge factor for us, very closely related to harmful interactions. But what we're finding through our EAP provider, through information we're getting from our staff across the country, is that mental health, stress and fatigue are a big factor. EAP data is showing us that around about 80% of people have got family, relationship, personal anxiety and other issues that emanate from their home life and from themselves, which we want to try and support, but we want to make sure that person is coming to work and is in a state where they're fit and well to do the job as best they can. And we know that if they are not feeling great or they're in a state of ill health or not as good as they could be mentally or emotionally, then that's going to be hard for them to be their best and manage these other situations. So mental health's a big one for us. We've got EAP, we've got over 70 mental health first responders, so people around the offices across the country who are there as a bit of someone to contact and reach out to and who can sort of point people in the right direction for support. There's a range of activities through the year that we roll out to make sure people feel engaged and are really happy to have a conversation about mental health and mental illness and focusing on the health side, obviously.
So acknowledging kind of the realities of life and that everyone has these things going on and that you can also have those stressful times at work. Have you got any tips or tricks around, sort of keeping yourself in a good mentally healthy space? EAP and those things are kind of the remedy.
Yep.
Have you got anything that's sort of proactive that people can be doing to keep themselves?
Yeah, I mean, our proactive things, when a lot of the issues are people at home, what we encourage and what we're trying to follow is the Tawhati Tapawha model in terms of the activities that we promote. So it's around physical activity, it's around being with family, spiritual awareness and emotional awareness and so on, and the mental health part. So having sort of elements of the physical activity, people's things like diet, keeping relatively fit and sort of mindful and all those other activities to try and keep people as balanced as they can be. Family events, having dogs and all pets and those sorts of things, all ways to sort of keep yourself a bit more balanced.
Ways to decompress too, isn't it? Like, you get home, you're a bit stressed, take the dog for a walk, it does wonders, doesn't it?
Indeed. I think it does, although I've just got a new dog and we got home yesterday afternoon, got a whole lot of stuff chewed up around the house, so it didn't quite decompress us, it kind of recompressed us, to be honest, but yeah, things like that, hobbies.
You've got to acknowledge the dog was probably dealing with its own anxiety.
It may have been. It may have been.
Mentally balanced.
Yeah, exactly right.
Some stuff.
Exactly right.
Dealing with boredom.
Yeah. The other things work-wise, what we're trying to sort of ensure is that, we're using Tapatahi results, a bit controversial at the moment, but we are using some of that data to try and sort of ensure that Managers are taking the lead in terms of the workplace, so giving people role clarity when there's org changes, as there are at the moment, that people are clear about what's going on. They have a sense of empowerment around that sort of stuff. So trying to balance the work activities and the home life activities. But for me, it's physical fitness and trying to sort of make sure I've got a bit of a social circle that I can kind of debrief with and so on.
I guess all of that's been elevated too over the last couple of years with this, all of the uncertainty that's been brought about with COVID.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think the highlight of COVID has allowed people to sort of reflect and do things that probably support them, whether that be flexible work, more time with family, pursuing hobbies and so on. So I think, people being able to reflect on how work interacts with their life, I think people are becoming a bit more open about it anyway.
Right.
I was going to say, it's actually Mental Health Awareness Week at the end of September as well, so we've got a bunch of activities through that week as well, so I should promote that too.
Yeah.
Henry, have you got any questions?
Yeah, I just wondered if you had any particular sort of strategies or suggestions for when people find themselves having a harmful interaction, be it on the phone or in person if they're at a site visit or something, of how, I guess my question is, should you try and get out? Are you actually at that point trying to manage, actually this is now a harmful interaction and all that matters now is me getting out of here safely? Or should we be trying to de-escalate, and how does the HEAT model work with that?
Yeah, the training, probably not so much the HEAT model there, but it's more around the actual customer service process and making sure we're starting to anticipate the types of interactions we're having that may lead to something adverse. The escalation really occurs when that person, when our regulator, when our team member feels unsafe, and they've got to start to sort of monitor that themselves. Some people will tolerate certain things that others won't, and some people have got more experience that others don't have, so they can sort of negotiate that a little bit. So it's a bit of a personal preference.
Right, and that's okay. To set your own sort of
It kind
standard.
of is, but then you've also got to recognise where your limitations lie. Like, one of the hardest things to do sometimes is to actually back away. If someone's being confrontational, and you might be in a situation where you're outside of your capabilities. And you've also got to not just feel unsafe, but have the ability to recognise when you are unsafe. There's another thing too, isn't it? To go, actually I feel comfortable here, but I'm ignorant to the fact that actually I'm not safe.
I think you and I are coming at this from opposite ends of the toughness spectrum, Paul.
I think there's a certain element where I guess there's two main areas as well, where if it's a physical, a face-to-face engagement. Sometimes when you're in the conversation, you don't actually perceive what's going on, and so having someone with you can see how things are escalating can be a bit of an independent view, and that's a really good tip to make sure you're not going out to places by yourself. Where possible, is certainly assessing the situation. I think on the phone, obviously, there's no physical threat, and you can sort of moderate that a little bit easier. You've got that sort of sense of distance, but certainly physically, and some of the stuff I've done in the past, working with police, having that third party, being able to monitor how things escalate, and seeing some of the physical behaviours that people might exhibit that you might not see when you're face to face with someone. So having a third party there is important for us.
Yeah, because we have a spotter for a lot of physical hazards on work sites, don't we? So I guess it's the same principle.
Yeah, and there's a concept of inattentional blindness, and so when you're focused on one particular thing, there's a whole lot of other stuff going on you can't see. And I think that famous song, the gorilla basketball gorilla thing talks about how people can't sort of see the gorilla going past. But that's a bit of that. But
I guess my question is, when are you trying to de-escalate, or are you actually just de-escalate and keep the conversation going, or just get out of there?
I think you get out of there when it gets too high, and then come back to it or work with someone who's got some experience and trying to approach it a new way.
Yeah. And I think, I really endorse that, as I was saying earlier. You won't be able to finish the job or finish the task then and there, but there's lots of other ways to finish it. And not being able to get the task done there and then is not a failure, right? That shouldn't be seen as, I haven't succeeded today, because as you said, the first thing is keep ourselves safe. That's the first, and if you succeed at that, that's success. And we can there's lots of other ways to finish the work. Phone the person back a few days later when there's cooler heads, or just go to written communication, or escalate it to a different team member or whatever, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do that, for sure.
Yeah. Very good.
Awesome. I've enjoyed this. I don't have any other questions. Do you have any sort of final words or parting shots you'd like to make?
Parting shots? No. as I said, Mental Health Awareness Week at the end of the month, reporting
Yeah.
things through Cordero My, so we can get the information, we can support better interventions, and speak to your manager about if you've got any ideas for reducing some
Yeah.
of these issues, particularly around harmful interactions for regulators,
Mm.
but also mental health. You know, if there's
Yeah.
things you can do to support your team or yourself, I really suggest you do them.
Awesome.
Can people take your dog for a walk
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
during the day?
Yeah, one of the neighbours has volunteered to do that, but that's only going to be 1 hour's worth. So
Right.
there's another sort of 7 or 8 hours worth
Yeah,
of activity
yeah.
that needs to be taken up. Yeah, that was definitely not a de-escalation thing, that dog.
Brilliant.
Sorry.
All right. Thank you very much. Great
Thank
to have
you.
on the
Thanks,
show.
Anthony.
Thanks for having me.
Nothing else from us. Ka kite whanau.